Hello, everybody. Jason and Kevin here at Edmonton, Illinois YouTube channel. Thanks for clicking on this link here today and taking a look at this video clip. As you know, we've been building up this YouTube channel. One arm, of course, focused on our programs and what we do at Edmentum and how we support schools here in Illinois. But then really this other arm is we really want to bring value and provide some opportunities for thought leadership from educators from across the state. And that's going to be the other arm of our YouTube channel, as we really take the opportunities like this to highlight great things that are going on across the state and really connect people across the state, educators. And so we're very pleased here today to have Dr. John Burkey with us. Dr. Burkey is the Executive Director for the Large Unit District Association here in Illinois. LUDA is how it's referred to. And but before that, he was a superintendent of schools in Huntley, District 158, and just a great guy. So we're thrilled to have John with us here today. John, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's great to be with you, Jason and Kevin. Good to be here this morning.
Yeah, thanks, John. We really appreciate your time, and we're really interested in getting your perspective just on the current shutdown, the current circumstances, the landscape of education as it is right now, and sort of things that you're hearing across the state as you've been talking with leaders from districts all the way down to Southern Illinois. So we're really thrilled to have you here today. So what I wanted to do to kick things off, John, is just to ask you as a former history teacher, and I know that you're a big history buff just in general, right? Maybe if you could kind of give us your thoughts on maybe putting this in context. How would you compare this shutdown or these current circumstances? How would you put that in a historical context, if at all?
Well, I think we don't always realize that we're in a big historical moment when we're actually in it, but we definitely are. And I think the closest time I can relate to would be 9/11. I think when we all went through 9/11 almost 20 years ago, it was the same thing, where we were living through an incredibly impactful time, and now we look back on it more as a historical moment. And at some point in time, we'll look back on this as a historical moment, but it definitely isn't now. And I think one way to frame it is look at it through the lens of our students. To us that are adults, and it's a couple months of our life, maybe more than a couple months, but at some point life will get back to some semblance of normal. But think about it from the perspective of a high school senior who may have missed his or her last sports season, will likely miss prom, will likely miss graduation. These are life events that we all remember from our childhood that this year's seniors will miss it, but never have an opportunity to actually experience it ever again as a participant. So I think we have to look at it through that lens as well.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Yeah, I mean, memorable. It's going to obviously be memorable for those kids, but just in a totally different way, right? Their experience, what they remember back from when they were seniors, is going to be completely different than what we remember from when we were seniors. Yeah, John, that's a very good point. How about just from maybe take a step back and put your superintendent hat on, right? And from that lens, how would you have, what would your response have been as a superintendent, given circumstances like these?
I think when we're faced with challenging circumstances, we have to do everything we can to not just get through the situation, but to try to take advantage of the situation, because you really have no alternative but to try to make the best you can, and to hopefully any bad situation, you can make something good come out of it. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen with this. Our schools are in all various states of technology, in various states of being able to provide education outside of the classroom, even if it's not a technology based. And I think our schools have all prepared for different things, but this has forced everyone to the same baseline of you have to do it, and you have to do it now. And I think that will be a positive. When I was a superintendent, the district I was in, we were one of the earliest adopters of true K-12 one-to-one technology in the state of Illinois. And my former district was very well prepared going into this because all of our students had devices. All of our students had digital curriculum already. But my former district still has a lot they can learn. But other districts that aren't even at that point are, I think, doing a great job of very quickly accelerating to that. I know one of our districts is U46 in Elgin. It's actually our largest district in LUDA. And they have done a great job of putting out Chromebooks to the early elementary students that didn't already have them. They realized that this isn't something we can just plan for the next time it happens or next year. We have to do this right now so our kids don't lose out on learning for the next 2 months. And so it's really, really put everybody in a position of having to immediately plan for this. But then the question becomes, where does this take us after this? And I think our districts as a whole will be much more agile and stronger at 21st century learning, teaching and learning than they were going into this, whether it was a pretty well-prepared district or a not so well-prepared district. I think the bar, everybody will have moved to a higher place after this. And I think that's a positive. The reality is education, and I'm generalizing, but for the most part, education doesn't look a lot different than it did 100 years ago. And I think we all know it needs to look different than it did 100 years ago. But the hard part isn't knowing it. The hard part is getting from A to B and truly moving mindsets from A to B. And I think this closure is really going to help our schools move along that continuum.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah. And kind of, on that same, going down that same path, right? The shutdown, caused the State Board of Education, right, to react and to kind of, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, right, help get schools and districts to a point that you're describing right now, right, to be able to try some different kinds of things because that's what we have to do. And the State Board of Education released their remote learning recommendations, and Kevin and I were curious just on your thoughts regarding those recommendations.
So I think overall, I think the remote learning recommendations are very positive. There's actually some statements in the opening to the learning recommendations about what specifically they talk some about student assessment, student grading, what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. And I got to tell you, I read those recommendations for what it should look like during the closure. And I said to myself, this is what it should look like all the time.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that Illinois started back a few years ago was they call it the competency-based grading pilot. And when I was still a superintendent, my district was one of the first 10 districts in that pilot. And now many more districts have become part of it. And I think competency-based education and grading is what the future is. And I think a number of schools, like I said, already made the foray into that. But I think that the state is basically saying in that document you referenced that this is what all students should be doing on some level. And so I hope it helps us move in that direction as well. And specifically what I mean by that is the document talks about how students should not be penalized during this period with their letter grade, and they should be use this as an opportunity to learn more, advance further in their knowledge and their skills and the things that they can do with that knowledge. But isn't that what all education should be at the time? And I think that it's going to help us shift there as well. And Illinois as a whole has been a pretty traditional state when it comes to that stuff. We still have a 5-hour per day seat time requirement in Illinois, which many states have done away with. And the reality is education is not about seat time. There are students that sit in a seat for 5 hours a day that aren't learning anything. And there's students that don't, that are learning a lot. And I'm a lot more interested in what the student's actually learning, what the student can demonstrate with that learning. And I really want to see our state continue to move in that direction. And I think that document, remote learning document, during this period helps us do that. But I hope we don't lose those principles after this period of time is over.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so to that point, John, as you've been, as the executive director of LUDA and you're connecting with all of the largest, K-12 districts across the state, what are some things, that you've been up to, right, in these current times, just in your position, right? So maybe some of the things you've been doing, and then some of the things maybe that you're hearing from the superintendents in LUDA.
So the strength of our organization is that we represent 53 of the largest districts that are unit districts in Illinois. And the strength of our organization is the collaboration we provide to our superintendents. We have some very progressive districts, some very progressive superintendents, and anybody who's progressive and is a thought leader, a top leader in their job, understands that the only way you can move forward is by collaborating with other people like that. And so our superintendents are very good at that. They very much want to seek out other LUDA superintendents and other superintendents in addition to that. But with the LUDA superintendents, we've been working to bring people together, and we've been holding web conversations just like we're having today with our superintendents to talk about e-learning. We did one earlier this week on developing the budget in this very challenging budget situation. And so that's how we've been able to network people and continue to build off of the thoughts that each individual have, but make us stronger as a unit by sharing those ideas. The other thing we do as an organization is we advocate in Springfield, the capital, on education issues. There's nothing happening right now in Springfield. They're basically shut down, as is the rest of the state. But per the state constitution, they need to adopt a budget by the end of May. And that is something that will be part of that conversation on of what that budget looks like. And as I referenced earlier, it's going to be a very challenging budget because there's going to be significant lost revenue because of the economy being shut down.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John. You mentioned a couple of things about the future and how, what you're hearing, and you mentioned the budgeting process, and that Springfield, not a lot of activity right now from a legislative standpoint. Can you talk a little bit more, though, about what you see as the impact for next year, and that as we look at 2021, how you can anticipate what this is going to do to our districts and schools next year?
Well, I don't think this is going to be over this year. So in the immediacy, I would say that I think there's the very real possibility that we are going to have intermittent shutdowns even going into next year. And I say intermittent because I think that's probably what it'll be. I don't think it'll be blanket nationwide shutdown probably for a whole year, but I think there will be periods where the pandemic surfaces in different places at different times. As many scientists are saying, it could diminish over the summer. It could very well come back again in the fall. We just don't know. And so I think it's really important for our schools to not look at this as we just got to get through May and then we'll be good. No, we're not going to be good. We have to be prepared to continue in this mode, at least in some fashion, as we go into next year. And then I think that the other conversation we need to have beyond this is what have we learned? What was positive about this education experience for kids, and what was negative? And there's going to be some of both. I think the student-teacher relationship is always going to be a crucial component of a child's education. I have never been an advocate for 100% distance learning, online learning. I think a blended format is what is always going to be best, and where you fall on the blended continuum totally depends on the needs of the student. But I think what we're learning through this is where can effective blended learning work, and where is the teacher in person with other classmates experience really needed. And I think that's what we're going to learn throughout this experience.
So you talked a lot about collaboration, you know, either within LUDA or within with other educators. We've talked about the uncertainty going forward. We've also talked about, you know, that just what you just mentioned, that blended continuum, and how districts can prepare for that. What other recommendations, what are some other thoughts or things that you would share with other leaders as recommendations that you've learned during this time?
I think one thing we've all learned is for humans in general, we're scared of change, and we're scared of change because it's unknown, and we all have a comfort zone. Some, you know, comfort zones are different than others, but I think one thing this has helped hopefully everyone do, because it was forced change, was to be more comfortable with change, to realize that we don't have to wait for a crisis situation to change the way we teach and educate and kids learn. That we need to always be very open, and it's cliche to say get out of the box, but we do need to think out of the box, and we need to be more comfortable with not just thinking out of the box, but actually getting out of the box and doing what's best for kids. One of the real challenges in Illinois, and it's across the country, but I can speak, you know, to Illinois, is we have huge inequities in this state in the opportunities that kids have. And, you know, we have, I think, done a lot as a state to address that. We're doing a lot with funding through the EBF formula to help address that, but those inequities still exist. And I will tell you that the digital divide is huge. These inequities have really been magnified by this closure, where there are kids in certain communities. As I said, the district where I was a superintendent, those kids for the most part they have devices, but they're also able to be connected to those devices at home. That's not the reality in many areas of our state. And it shouldn't matter what zip code you live in as to what your educational opportunities are. And I think we have a moral obligation to continue to break down those inequities and ultimately provide a very equitable experience for kids, no matter what zip code they live in Illinois. And so I think that is what we need to continue to work on. I think this closure, again, when I talk about a bad situation leading to something good, I think this has magnified some of those divides, and it's illustrated where we just cannot accept that we are going to allow those divides to continue.
Well, John, I think that's a really good note to end our time on today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and to share your thoughts. And we thank you for your leadership during this time. We know a lot of leaders look to you, and we're just grateful for the time and effort you've put into this. And we'll continue the conversation as we move forward. And again, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks to both of you, and thanks to all the work that your company's doing to help districts do all the things that we've just talked about.
Thanks, John.